Honored and privileged to be sitting with these fine folks to my right. And so I think it would be a little bit different, and I would love to do it a little bit differently than we've introduced the previous panels. I'd love to have them kind of introduce themselves, very music education of me, and be able to kind of see what light they're coming from in terms of their educational background, where they see their uses in AI, and then we'll get into some questions that I think will arise from that. So Dr. Webster.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And it's great to be here. I have a few slides that kind of introduce who I am, which I thought I would do in this short 5 minutes. So if we could have the first one, we would be off and running. So I am a music educator, as is many of the people on the panel here, and I'm also someone who's been in music education for a long time. So I thought I would give you a little bit of sense of what I believe in. As it says here, I'm dedicated to the cause of the best music education we can possibly give to our students. I call it music teaching and learning because that's a more modern way of thinking about what music education is in our society, which is not just K through 12, but it's all over the community and adult education. So I think a good name of a department as School of Music is not music education, but music teaching and learning, which I think is much more broad. I have focused on the study of creative thinking in music, creativity all my life. I started in graduate school at Eastman looking at it and still study it. And the other piece of that is music technology in terms of the general and specifically as it relates to pedagogy, which I've always been interested in and have written a good deal about. So the next slide tends to show a little bit of my personal beliefs, which I believe is kind of important to understand for people who are starting to work on AI to figure out how they fit into who they are. So I believe in the first bullet that music is one of those many things that make us very special in this world. And I think that music teaching must engage students in at least 4 different ways, the 4 ways of making music. These 4 ways of making music should be embedded in the way we teach children. I believe that we have only been invested largely in this country in music over the performance of others, which is wonderful, but I also think improvisation, composition, and music listening are an important part of how curriculums should be designed. The process of teaching music with these 4 activities I have in mind strongly is supported by technology. So all my life I've been interested in technology because I realize that it's a key to engaging people with that. So a few other things, I've studied assessment, I've studied other kinds, you can go to the next slide. I've done a model of creative thinking in music, go to the next slide. I've done this measure of creative thinking in music that I give to anybody who wants to look at it, because I do think it's possible to assess children's thinking creatively in music. And then I've come to believe in revision. That is the task of asking kids to actually revise whatever it is that they do. Because I think sometimes they think they're one and done, and I think that's not it. I think it's a first effort and then continue on. And I believe in portfolios. I believe it's important for keeping record in all 4 of those music things, but particularly improvisation, creative acts, creative objects that to be kept in some kind of portfolio. And I think revision is a great idea. The next slide just simply shows what we already know about AI. I came to AI early, that is to say early on when it first began, I sort of rejected it. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't think this is particularly good for creativeness. And now I've come completely around to the view that not only should AI be used in the pursuit of creative activities, we ought to be engineering our assignments for students in schools that actually engage them in AI right from the start. Quite the different view of some teachers who don't want to even look at it. My feeling is it ought to be embraced at the core of what it is that they are doing, particularly with the more creative aspect, because it can be used, if used well, and that's a good thing to talk about in this panel, I think we can really make it a big difference in how people think imaginatively about sound. So that's my introduction. I have a few more things here, but I will stop there because I don't want to dominate. But that's who I am, what I believe in. And I'm a big believer in Western art music, believe it deeply, and I am very much open to all kinds of other kinds of musics too. But as we work with AI, it's important for us to look for how it helps the full panoply of different kinds of musics across the world if we're going to use it well. So that's my opening.
Great.
Sabo.
Thank you, Dr. Webster.
Yep.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Dr. Diaz.
Good morning, everyone. It's a real honor to be on this panel with these amazing individuals who I have long admired as a person in this field. So I feel this is kind of cool. I'm getting vibes from them. And I feel like my cognition is already extending a little bit, which is actually a little bit of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm an associate professor here at the Jacobs School of Music in the Music Education Department. I was a public school teacher for about 10 years before going into higher education. So the reason I bring that up is I think a lot of my work as a researcher and as a thinker and as a practitioner in music education gets into bridging very advanced theoretical knowledge, philosophical approaches, and all of the things that we deal with in higher ed in a way that we can communicate it to public school teachers, K through 12 teachers, and folks who aren't interested necessarily in some of the more refined, and that's a tough word, but some of the more in-depth sort of analytical, abstract arguments that we engage in the academy. So I'm always living in those two worlds. As a researcher, I started my career looking at the idea of flow, the idea of Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi's flow and how that affected our engagement levels with students and how they were engaged with us, how it affected our thinking. So a lot of my work really gets down to the fundamental question of what is a mind and how do we use that mind in a way that is enlightening for us, engaging, which builds a life which is meaningful and creative for us. And anytime you think about these issues, I think you have to think about all the different tools that we use to talk about and engage with our minds. So I'm a person who writes philosophically on some level about something called 4E cognition, which is a type of embodied cognition theory that I'm not going to get into too deeply. But one of those elements of 4E is something called extended cognition, the idea that we use tools in our environment to extend our cognition. You're doing it right now if you're on a phone. You do it when you get in your car and you're using some kind of navigation system. We've been doing this as a species for millennia. All right, we've always extended our cognition, and abacus was extended cognition. That, to me, is sort of where I am with artificial intelligence, where there are certainly lots of ethical issues and lots of things to consider. I'm very interested in the idea of adding artificial intelligence to how we think as another agent. When I think with people. When I am creative with people. When I teach, I teach as an interaction between myself and my students. It's never a one-way street. So when I think of intelligence and I think of creativity, I think of the various agents involved affecting each other, creating something, what we might call an epiphenomena. Something that's really kind of bigger than the sum of its parts, right? Okay, so practically for this presentation, I am going to get into the topic, I think a very practical topic of, in order to even enter this world, I think you have to ask good questions, right? And part of the deal with artificial intelligence is that I think sometimes, especially K through 12 teachers, who I'm going to be addressing more, I'm going to be addressing specifically during this talk or discussion, is that I'll often hear, I don't really know how to use this, or I told it to do this and it didn't give me a good answer, and I think, like in any other field, asking a good question is what leads you to a good answer, whether it's research or teaching or anything else. So what I'm going to talk about today is a model that I've developed over the last 2 years. It's an iterative model. I keep working on it, and it really, I'm hoping to use this model to give teachers a particular tool, a particular way of thinking about prompting artificial intelligence so that you ask good questions to get good answers. And to address just one small thing before we move on that was brought up just a little bit earlier, the reason I do this is I think as an individual who works in a field that has a lot of administrative tasks and duties and things that I have to do but don't necessarily want to do all the time, artificial intelligence for me is a way of doing this in a much more efficient, a much more clean way, and in a way that actually opens up time for me to teach and engage with students in a way that I really want to engage with, right? So I'll talk a little bit about that, and again, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz. Dr. Bauer.
Thanks. Thanks to Chase for inviting me to be on this panel and for the Jacobs School for your great hospitality here so far in the conference. Much appreciated. So I'm a professor of music education and director of the online Master of Music and Music Education program at the University of Florida, where I've been on the faculty since about 2011. And before that, this is my 30th year in higher education overall, but before that, I taught, like Frank and Peter, I taught public school, and I was a high school band and orchestra director for 8 years in the public schools of Ohio, and that has impacted my whole life in higher ed. You know, what I do mostly in higher ed is I help prepare people to be music teachers in schools, or I work with graduate students who are coming back for advanced degrees. And I'm always very empathetic with the situations they're dealing with in K-12 schools, which certainly isn't getting any easier these days. And thinking about ways that I can help them deal with the situations they're dealing with and just be better music teachers for their own students. So everything that I've done, whether it's pedagogically, what I do in my classes, or from research and scholarship, has been oriented towards that. So when I started out in higher ed, I was coming right out of the classroom, and I was a high school band and orchestra director primarily, and I was very interested in issues related to that. But very quickly, and actually probably before that, as I'm thinking about it, my first real foray into technology was when I wrote my master's thesis, and I bought an Apple IIe computer in order to do that. And I can imagine having to have had to type that document. And so from then on, I thought a lot about technology and what the affordances of technology are and how they can help us with certain problems we face, and also what the constraints are to technology. Technology is not a panacea. It doesn't solve all our problems, but often if used properly, which I heard that phrase a little bit earlier from one of my colleagues here, if used properly and appropriately, can make a big difference, I think, in what we're able to do as teachers, as researchers, and what we're able to provide our students. So I've had this growing interest in technology, and there's a quote that by the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke that really resonates with me, and it's, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And to me, technology has always been kind of magic. You know, how does this happen? How can it do these things that it does? And learning more about not only the technical side, but then I'm always thinking about how can I help teachers use this, K-12 teachers in schools and so forth. So along that lines, you know, I continue to do research related to technology, and it's usually technology in the intersection of something else. I came across this concept called technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge, or TPAC. And basically, I should have had a slide on this, but it's a Venn diagram with technology, pedagogy, and your content, your subject matter all together. And that intersection of those three circles in the Venn diagram is TPAC. And so how can we help music teachers develop their technological, pedagogical, and content knowledge? In other words, the ability to use technology appropriately to serve the subject matter, which for us is music. And so that paradigm was in the forefront of my mind, and I wrote a book called Music Learning Today, Digital Pedagogy for Creating, Performing, and Responding to Music, which is published by Oxford University Press. More recently, I've been trying to figure out how to get my head around AI, and I always kind of scolded myself for choosing technology as an area to delve into because it changes so rapidly, right? You know, how do you write about something? And so I've tried to be more conceptual about it, but now with AI, I thought it was fast before, and you know, now it just is zooming along. You can't even hope to catch up. Somebody asked me yesterday how I was enjoying the panel discussions, and I said it's like drinking from a fire hose. You know, there's so much information out there; it's really hard to make sense of it all and stay on top of it. So I've been thinking more and more about AI. I'm a member of the National Association for Music Education, NAFME's task force on AI, and we're working to put together some resources for teachers that will be on the NAFME website to help them deal with various aspects of AI. And then I'm also beginning to work on a couple of chapters that's going to be in a new Oxford handbook of music education and AI. One of those chapters is with Peter, and another is on ethical considerations, which I think we're going to talk about here this morning yet. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Dr. Bauer. And last but not least, Jason.
Hello, I'm Jason Palamara, and just thank you. I'm also super honored to be here with such esteemed panelists, and thank you, Alon and Isaac and Chase for putting this whole thing together. So I teach at IU Indianapolis at the Heron School of Art and Design, and music, as I say. So if I say anything that isn't completely true about the way I teach, my students are here. I'm sure they'll riot or throw a bagel at me. So I think the thing I'm bringing to this panel is that my experience, I haven't taught in public education very much. I've been mostly at the higher ed. The experience I do have is in teaching students how to build AI from the ground up, and then also how to use it in performance, in like live situations. We do also get into situations, where there are ethical concerns. We've encountered ethical concerns, in the wild at times. I've had students who accidentally blundered into things like cultural appropriation, and we didn't mean to, but here we are, and now we've done it. Now what do we do? Things like that. And also through I teach a course called Autonomous Music Systems, where we start essentially from algorithmic music, and and have as a North Star a machine that could just play along with us, and we get as close to that as we can every single semester. And we never get all the way, but someday maybe we will. But periodically, there are these like mind-blowing moments where I say, if you've used ChatGPT, have you looked at what it knows about you? Like there's a memory thing in there where you can click on that, and I did that the other day in class, and somebody said, "Oh my goodness," So I use a lot of tools. I'm also a composer. I use AI tools in my own composition and in recordings and things like that. And I have the Avatar program that I work on with Scott Deal that I talked about yesterday. So that's the sum of where I am with AI. I love AI. I think it's great. I think it brings a lot to the table. And I think also there's a lot of danger. There's a lot of danger that we'll kind of lose ourselves in AI, or that people will use AI to manipulate us. That's kind of a danger as well. And using any technology is a double-edged sword. You gain some things, but you have to leave some other things behind, and that's not always good. So I think we should go in with our eyes open, and definitely teach our students in that way, that they know okay, well, I can do this thing, but make sure you don't do this or don't do this. These are where the guide rails are. So that's me.
Thank you, Jason. So yeah, the reasoning for that is I think you could kind of clearly see we are all music educators in some capacity, and just as a show of raise of hands, who would deem themselves as a teacher in some way? An educator or a teacher? Yeah. So if any of you maybe resonated with some of the things that were said, or maybe didn't resonate with some of the things that were said, I think that was kind of the purpose of this, to see that AI can be used in so many different ways. And we've been hearing some of the words like curiosity and divergence, and trying to combine all of the things that AI has the power to do and use it kind of for our own good in our own light. And so I think, if you don't mind, Dr. Diaz, I think jumping into the idea of good questions and kind of prompting AI might be a good place to start.
Yeah, thank you. And I have to try to stay on task, because when I'm around really smart people and they give me a new idea, I feel like going in their direction. So I'm gonna stay on task. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to give you a model for those of you who use any kind of prompting on large language models, LLMs. Asking a good question is going to give you, of course, a better answer. Now, thinking about how to do that concretely can be difficult. There are a lot of different LLMs. All of them have different strengths and weaknesses. I certainly use 2 or 3 at minimum to do various tasks. If it's reasoning tasks, I tend to use ChatGPT, a paid version of that. If it's more of a writing task where I want to be a little bit more creative, I feel like Claude AI works quite a bit better for me. There's also Perplexity for research. So there's a lot of different tools. But I think for all of them, they have one thing in common, which is the kind of input that you use. I did have a slide, and I forgot to send it to Chase because I have another thing today, and I was thinking about that, so apologies, Chase. So hopefully you'll remember this, and if not, we can put it maybe up somewhere for later. So the craft method is what I'm gonna talk to you about, but it's really craft plus I. So you can call it crafty, but it doesn't quite make sense. But it is a craft method. And that's the idea that whenever you start working with an LLM, the very first thing that you want to think about is context. So C, context. By giving the LLM some kind of context about what you're thinking about, who are you? So for instance, let's say you're a middle school band director and you want to write a rubric for trumpet embouchure. Right, something really esoteric like that. My friend Brian in the back is very excited about this. You have to, in order to send this machine or this process in the right direction, you got to give it a context. So it ends up predicting things in an area that makes sense within that context, right? So for instance, you might say something like, act as a middle school band director. You are working with 6th graders in a school which has the following instrumentation. The students are at this level of performance. Give it as much detail as you can to the degree, when you're thinking about what you want. And that's already going to send the LLM in a better direction than give me a rubric on trumpet embouchure. Okay? Number 2, so that's context. The other one is request, right? So now that you've given it a context, you got to ask it to do something. What do you want, right? And so for instance, I was talking about a rubric in this case. I might say, I would like you to create a rubric. In this rubric, I need you to think about the following things. Physical aspects of the embouchure. Whatever you might think about might be important. At this point, if you have a paid version, I think actually the free versions of this do it too, you can even feed it a particular type or a few rubrics and say, I'm giving you these ideas, but here's some other ideas, contextual ideas of what rubrics for trumpet embouchure actually look like. Okay? So you're giving it a lot of good information to work with, which is going to send the predictions, right, or in a way that is going to be much more fruitful. Okay? So you tell it, create a rubric, blah, 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 based on this criteria. Then you got to think about the audience. And this is the other part that I find really fascinating, right? So we have context, request, we have audience. Who is this for? Is this for your kids? Is this for you? Is this for a handbook? Is this for something to put online? So giving it the audience that you want to use this tool with is incredibly important. I have several versions of particular syllabi language that I use that I adapt, for instance, for my freshman class. I have a set of ideas that I use with my graduate class, but I say, make this so that a person who is coming into college for the first time and perhaps doesn't have the sophisticated vocabulary of a graduate student, that they're gonna get the same idea, but with language that makes sense to them. And it's magic. I mean, this really creates a very different set of tools that these students can use that I can probably think of, but it would take me 45 minutes to an hour to do that, and I'd rather work on the actual content in the syllabus a little bit more. So we have context, what is going on here, what's your role, what's the situation, what you're asking it to, the request, and then the audience, okay? And then finally, this is another thing you have to tell LLMs that I think work very well for these kinds of administrative tasks, is what format do you want it in? Do you want a letter? Do you want a set, like a table? Do you want an email? Do you want a PowerPoint? You can actually ask ChatGPT now to create PowerPoint slides for you. They're not great, but you have to work with them. But again, we're not trying to get to a final product here, right? What we're trying to do is work with this as almost like we're dealing with a person, a really excellent administrative assistant who is going to help you with things. They know some stuff, but they're going to need some guidance, right? And so the last part of that is to give it constraints. If you don't give it constraints, it's going to go all over the place, right? So what does a constraint mean? This is tone or task, right? So you said, I want this in bullet points with timestamps, or I want it to be in a table. You can also say something like use supportive student-friendly language. Keep it under one page. You have to give it some kind of restriction. Now, in all these steps, there's other steps you can take as well. You can do this in a conversational manner, right? You can always go back and to a step before. And so the plus I here at the end is the iteration. I treat ChatGPT and other LLMs as a conversational partner. I think of them as a really, again, a very sophisticated graduate student who I'm asking to look up information, say I'm doing a literature review with them, and say, hey, look this up, and also think about these constraints and think about this, so that when they come back to me, they've got the best set of information or constraints that they can to give me better knowledge, right? And then we go back and forth, like we do in everyday life when we're learning something. Tell me something I missed here. What else? How else can I do this? Through this iterative process, not only is it a creative task, but in many ways, it can give you products that you might be surprised. I often find that these rubrics, these syllabi, they're not completely auto-generated products that are coming from the LLM themselves. They're a combination of me and this mysterious process. Actually, it's not that mysterious. And this process that is indistinguishable from magic, because it does feel like magic. I often will tell the LLM, how does this even work? Why do I think you're real? And that's different. That's late at night at 2 in the morning. I haven't gone to bed. I'm having deep philosophical
Some bourbon,
questions.
maybe,
Yeah,
right?
some bourbon actually causes that, triggers it a little bit. So again, I just wanted to offer that model for you, especially those of you who have really busy 7-period-a-day jobs teaching lots of people, and you don't have an administrative assistant. You need to do these things. They're important. Using this craft model of context, request, audience, format, tone, task, plus I, iterate, is gonna get you pretty far, even with the cheaper models or the free models of these LLMs. That's it.
Awesome. I didn't mean to situate everything as we clap after each thought, but I do feel that those are warranted claps for sure. And I want to actually go to Jason next, because I think the common words we use when we're thinking of AI, or when you're hearing in lay terms, when you think AI, I think you very commonly think ChatGPT, or you think of LLMs. And I know all of us have, or I have talked with all of them here about different tools other than LLMs, but I think Jason very actively uses some audio tools. So if you wouldn't mind going into some of those, I think those would be really helpful.
Yeah, and there are fantastic things. Yesterday, there was a great presentation by Matt Henninger from Moises. Moises is an excellent tool for doing basically all kinds of audio things. It does automatic source separation. He was showing yesterday. Now it does beat detection, where it'll show you the rhythm and also the form of a piece. That is fantastic. If you're wanting to write a lead sheet or something for jazz band, for instance, it can even do chord detection. Fantastic stuff, and they're really becoming like a one-stop shop for like all things audio related, and that's really in the realm of music information retrieval. Not so much in generative AI. He said there are some things they're working on in generative AI, but the generative AI is the one area where I think the students really will know a lot more about it than we will, because a lot of these things are fun, they're memeable. People experiment with them. I was talking to one of my students last night, and she said, yeah, we're growing up with AI, that's been here forever as far as we're concerned. So they're much less concerned about it, and they're probably going to find tools that we don't even know about. And then that's something I've found in my autonomous music systems. One of my favorite things is at the end of the semester I say, okay, here's your final project. Go find something that I don't know about and report back on it, do a presentation on it. And that's how I found out about ChatGPT. Someone actually just said, hey, I just did my presentation on this. And I said, whoa, that's okay, never mind. Forget the entire semester you just had. So I mean, I've learned a ton from the students. I mean, they're going to lead in a lot of different ways, but that's also kind of dangerous. I mean, that moment where I said to the students, have you looked up, the memory of ChatGPT? Have you actually investigated, because it'll tell you how much it knows about you. And, and they had all been using it for years now and had no idea that it was keeping this little record of facts. And that's not as creepy as you think about it. I mean, somewhere in my head, there's a list of facts about the people I know as well. But it's just kind of, disconcerting when you see it on a list and you're like, ooh, wow, it thinks that about me? Whoa, yeah, so there are fantastic tools. There's a thing that I recently discovered called weights.com. Weights.com is like the Wild West of AI generative tools. You can make voice models, you can make voice clones from very small snippets or very small databases or of samples. That's so if you want to make a deep fake, Taylor Swift song or something like that, you can. I made a duet between Taylor Swift and Johnny Cash singing in ancient Greek recently. And I think it just sounds fantastic and I love it and I'm totally using it, and I think when you use it in, kitschy kind of creative ways like that, it's really great. There are some dark uses of this as well that you could get into, and I think without knowing it, students will sometimes get into that and get in trouble, and adults will as well. I think sometimes we will have a tendency to do that. There's also so I think Moises is probably the best one for educators to really get into. If you're into like audio production, the Isotope company has really done a lot with audio tools that are based in machine learning, and have really come up with some interesting things like the ability to reverse. So basically, if you have a model of what a good track sounds like, you can also reverse that and say, well, what would it sound like if it was the complete opposite of a good track? And sometimes that sounds pretty dope, I think there's tons of things out there. When I hear people speaking about tools, I think a lot of times people say, it's just a tool. Don't worry, it's not gonna take over the world. There's this line in one of the Harry Potter movies where Arthur Weasley says, "Never trust anything that can think for itself if you don't know where it keeps its brain." And I think that's really good advice. You don't know where this thing keeps its brain. You don't even know where it keeps its memory. You don't know what it knows about you, and therefore you should have a little bit of distrust between you and it, final statement.
Yeah, that's a great, I think it's segueing so nicely. I didn't plan this, but it's just so beautiful into what I think Dr. Bauer might shed some more light on in terms of concerns that we have, some of the distrust, and I like to use the word healthily skeptical, realizing that I think there's extreme potential, but that without that kind of healthy skepticism, I think we can get into places that Jason was talking about, kind of that dark place of us maybe appropriating, maybe doing things that we don't necessarily want it to do. So, Dr. Bauer, would you mind kind of shedding some more light on that?
So one of my roles on the NAFME task force has been to think about and suggest some processes to deal with some of the ethical considerations that surround AI. And so I have a list of them that will be coming up here shortly. But in the K-12 world, and a lot of these really aren't new, they're things that we've been thinking about when we're using technology with kids for a long, long time. And the first of these that I wanted to talk about was just basic privacy and data security. So when you have students logging into any kind of technology platform, you want to make sure that their personal data is protected so that other people can't get it. And so probably many of you are familiar with the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, that these are federal guidelines that delineate exactly what data can be collected, how it needs to be secured, and all of those sort of things. So when we're using AI tools, certainly you want to use AI tools that are in compliance with FERPA, and they're going to protect not only the student's name and password and things like that, but also whatever data that they provide the AI in order to accomplish whatever they're accomplishing, because you don't want to go to ChatGPT and find that all this hidden secrets about your students are there. So looking at the privacy and data security is important. Yeah, here's the list. So probably a lot of you, if you have even just a passing interest in AI, have heard about the biases that can be in AI and whether it's a fair system or not, fair technology or not. And basically AI systems are only as unbiased as the data on which they're trained. And we may have, some of us may have seen the pictures where they ask for a certain thing and like only white males will come up because that's what the system was trained on. And so we want to keep working to make sure that we have robust data sets that these are trained on. An example in music might be if you ask it something about music, you ask an AI about music, and it only gives you answers that correspond to Western art music. It doesn't take into account other kinds of musics from around the world, or even other kinds of musics within our Western society. So we want to make sure that the training data that the AIs we used are reflective of whatever the paradigm is that we're interested in exploring with AI. Transparency is another one. So a lot of AI tools are what they call black box, that you kind of don't really know what's happening inside that because they're proprietary algorithms that are used, and companies don't share that and that sort of thing. And I think it's important that at least we have a basic understanding as teachers about how AI works, and better yet would be if we get to the point where we're able to kind of train our own AIs. I've heard people talk about ChatGPT and other technologies like that, other AIs like that are called large language models, and I've heard some other people talk about small language models. And so that's one that you train yourself and you use it for a very specific purpose, and I think that's worth exploring as well. For teachers, I know especially in higher ed, one of the big concerns about AI is, are students using it to cheat? And the answer is yes, they are. They're using it to cheat. And so what we need to do, I think, as educators is to have very clear guidelines about our expectations, and maybe our schools, if you're a university professor, maybe the university has some guidelines. I know at the University of Florida, nothing has been mandated yet that we include, but a lot of people are including a statement in their syllabus about what is appropriate use of AI, what isn't appropriate use of AI. There's no hard and fast rules for this, but some of the things that people generally feel are okay to use AI for are brainstorming, outlining, drafting, revising, reflecting, as Frank was talking about, kind of using it as another person, thinking of it as a very intelligent assistant that you can bounce ideas off of, you can find holes in your own arguments and things like that. Also, for teachers, I think it's important that we begin to focus more on process rather than that final product, that final paper. And so maybe you want to have students submit things along the way and then give them formative feedback on that and have discussions with them about why they came up with this particular structure to the paper or things like that, so that you're sure they're doing the mental work that's really important, and they're developing those fundamental skills that they're going to need to think critically and think creatively. This also relates to the roles of teachers, and basically the way I'm thinking about it is AI should be used as a tool. It should be used to enhance what you do as a teacher. It's certainly no substitute for teachers. And in music and just in teaching in general, that relationship you have with students, that social, emotional learning component that goes on, helping students to be musically expressive, those are things that AI can't do very well, at least yet. And so those are things that teachers need to realize are still important, even if they are using AI with their students. Yesterday, we talked a lot about, in the panels, about intellectual property, and I think there's kind of two sides to that. One is there's a concern over a lot of AIs have been trained on copyrighted material and how you feel about that and whether you think it's ethically okay to use those AIs. And we had good arguments kind of on both sides of that issue yesterday morning in the panels. And the other is what happens to works that you create or your students create that are using AI in terms of, are those copyrightable? And basically, in very broad strokes, the way it is right now, if something is created completely by an AI, it's not copyrightable at all. But if there's a human element, if the humans have, if there's a demonstrated way that a human has greatly influenced this and maybe used the AI in a limited capacity and those sort of things, then there is the possibility of copyright. So certainly we need to teach our students to respect copyright, to respect others' intellectual property, but we also need to be concerned about their works and whether those are going to be protected under copyright law. Some people are worried that AI will take away the skill development that their students need, basic fundamental skills and so forth, and how they could become dependent on AI and not be able to do things on their own. These same sort of arguments, I think, have come out for earlier technologies. Like I remember when I was in high school, like you weren't allowed to use calculators in math class at all, right? And because you had to learn how to do those things in your head or on paper or whatever. Now you can't sign up for an advanced math class, right, without purchasing a calculator also. So it's part of how we evolve as a society, how the technology evolves, and figuring out the appropriate ways to use AI and what is not appropriate. And so we just don't know that, but we do need to be sure that we're supplementing AI with other sorts of instruction, with other sorts of learning experiences for students so that they are developing those fundamental skills to being a musician. I'm going to skip over creativity because I know Peter's going to talk about that in a little bit. And then the last thing is accessibility and inclusion. So making sure that all students are able to benefit. And so this goes, again, something that has been talked about for a while in technology is the digital divide. And so our students in rural schools able to access these AI models that can do these things. Also, what about people with disabilities of one sort or another? AI can really help that. I did a survey last summer of music teachers and kind of their perceptions on AI. And one thing that people are excited about are learning about ways that AI can help them help students with exceptionalities and to be able to help them develop the musical skills and understandings that are important for all of us. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. It's probably not an exhaustive list of the ethical considerations, but I think those are some of the main points that we need to be thinking about and working through. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Bauer. Yeah, and I guess they're, once again, beautifully leading into Dr. Webster's kind of idea of the creative partnership that you have with AI. So you can talk more about that.
Yeah, I'd like to start by talking about cheating. And that's an interesting word, and as I think about it, maybe it has something to do with the nature of a task we're asking students to do. So, you know, a student will be given an assignment and there may be some problems with the teacher thinking about students using that assignment with AI and not really internalizing what the idea is, like something in theory, chord progressions, intervals, scales. Think of all the things that are those technical things that we really want our students to know if they're going to be creative with music. It occurs to me that the way to get around that is what Bill said about formative assessment about giving tasks which allow them to make something and have them realize the need internally for understanding structural aspects of music and using AI perhaps to help with that. So rather than be sort of thoughtful and fearful about students who may use AI for cheating for really basic information, it might be useful to change the paradigm in your mind as a teacher, and that is to create assignments, tasks, creative tasks particularly, whether they be improvisation or composition, which open the door for why these things are so important, why notation may be an important thing to learn. The way chords move in a blues progression may be discovered on their own by experimenting with tools that might be assisted by AI that have students to be internally motivated to learn more about something. So I'm a constructionist in terms of my philosophy of music, of general learning anyway. So any tasks which we create, I think ought to be based on making things, the maker movement, the idea of making something. If you want to know about whether a person understands syncopation, you don't simply explain it theoretically, you ask them to create some music that has syncopation, and you can evaluate whether or not the student understands what the syncopation is. So I think the role of any technology tool particularly is to help make the affordance possible for a student working in teams would be good, because I think a lot of students learn so much from each other. Learning to do things in music that require the discovery of the very thing that you want to talk. Then you can pull back as a teacher, perhaps, when there's a number of discoveries about why some things are not working or what they want to do to make it sound better. You can pull back and say, let me go through some technical stuff about why, and they will listen to you and realize that they can go back into their resources and find out more about it. So it's not a matter of being fearful of cheating. The cheating thing should be just wiped out of your idea. The idea is to provide students, and this is a very liberal view, I understand, you should provide a platform in your classes, and I don't care if this is a performance class, improvisation class, music listening class, music theory class, whatever. Create a chance for things to be made that allow students to be able to understand what music is and how it works. So I feel deeply about this for music listening and a wide variety of musics across all art forms. So I think it's possible to create wonderful TPAC-oriented curriculums that in fact are based on discovery, based on things that will naturally occur when you ask kids to make things. So that's one belief I have about how AI can interface with a strong philosophical idea about how to teach music that will help get away from this idea that you need to hold kids responsible for items on a quiz or something that are very basic, and the first thing a kid will think about was, well, AI can do that for me, and so great, let's use AI for that, and get the level of instruction up a bit so it's involved with the kinds of things that. All right, so that's one thing I want to say. Another one is that the song-based AI generative programs that I've seen come out, and I'm thinking of Udio rather, and some of these others you've seen, there's a whole list of them, are all based on popular music models. So when you say you're going to use these software programs to create songs, that's what they're designed to do. And so that you have a prompt and you have styles to choose from that are largely based on sonic structures that are from popular music. No problem with that for me, except that it's very limited. How about the child who wants to write, or a person who wants to write a school song, or a choir piece, or a band arrangement, or a jazz tune, jazz arrangement for class or something like that. Those programs are very limited in scope for that kind of thing right now. I think this will change, but I'm suggesting that one way to think about these programs is that you ought to pair it with DAWs. So you are, I even have a slide. I don't think it's useful to go to it, but you can do this yourself. You can ask AI to say, I'm using many AI music creation programs, and I'm wondering how I can use GarageBand with it. That's exactly the prompt I asked. And it was impressive when it came out. It explained that he says to me right away, that's a good work model, Peter, rewarding me, And then it went on to explain how one can use some of these discovery programs that are quite obviously available for kids to use as sort of spark plugs. Yeast for making bread for something that might, one of the things I really look for in these programs is stem extraction. So in fact, you can have kids kind of create something with the affordances given by that program, and then ask it to somehow show you what the actual tracks are. And it's a track-based system. That's a whole other topic because not all music composition technology programs are track-based. There's, as you all may know, with Ableton Live, there are other ways of thinking about composing and improv, but not getting into those weeds, just to say simply that tracks can be extracted, audio and MIDI, which is pretty amazing, and they can, we've always had MIDI to audio, but audio to MIDI is pretty impressive with a modern day software. That's a new development since I've been involved with it. So having that all happen and then pushing that into a DAW like GarageBand or any of the famous DAWs that are out there. We have a nice example in BandLab where they have a little creator starter thing that you can have happen, and it creates these tracks. So that's a good idea. So I wonder about other programs, what kind of will be on the road for creating structures for people then to learn about orchestration, learn about creating an environment with AI's help perhaps of how sounds can be combined together. Why is it that a piccolo and a tuba might be an interesting sound source together? Why is it that yesterday we had I thought a great keynote address that talked about surprise and curiosity, and the scholar actually talked about surprise in Beethoven and played excerpts from Beethoven of how that surprise kind of got him to, I think his point, and he was actually a scholar in writing about copyright, but what was impressive to me about that was he was also a performance musician, played basset horn and all of this. I don't know if you've heard that talk, but it was fabulous. So what happened there was it puts us into this world of feelingfulness, aesthetic understanding, and gets quickly to the question of how we can construct musical things, which in fact are what we know music to be, which is this kind of powerful art form that puts us in touch with our basic human needs. Okay, so when it comes to AI, it seems to me it's all about devil in the details. How we actually use it in terms of the tools we already have, and in terms of a solid philosophy of teaching, so that we understand how to involve kids, in my judgment, making music in various ways. One more example is music listening. It occurs to me that AI is a wonderful tool for encouraging students to understand how music is made and how music has the power that it does for us. So how about using AI to kind of interrogate that and maybe even interrogate a particular composer, a particular kind of non-Western art music, some other kind of musical structure that you want to include in your classes. How about using its power to provide ideas about why the music moves us the way it does? And so I think that is opens up a extraordinary treasure chest of tools for us as teachers to be able to get to what music is and what all art is, for that matter. We have other ways of creating art that's with AI that has to do with visualization and stuff like that. I am absolutely positively sure, I would bet my salary on it. I don't have a salary now, but I would bet everything that I have on the fact that an art teacher is finding interesting uses of AI generation to talk about color, to talk about shape, to talk about design, and why it is that a masterpiece like the Starry Night could be made by AI, but then looking at the original, or take Hopper, for instance, if you're an American realist, and think of his beautiful paintings and ask AI to create something like that, and then compare it to the real thing. I'm absolutely sure an art teacher would love to show what is happening there that way and how we can use AI for that. So I guess I'm sort of passionate to move all the way around to thinking about this as a tool that can really aid creativeness, which then feeds into real musical understanding. So I think I'll stop with that. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Webster.
You're smart guy.
Yeah. So we're going to start to move to our questions, but not to necessarily try and summarize all of that into one thing. But I do want to share kind of my own sentiments about just, I think we could all agree that I think a good first step is just a bigger awareness of AI's capabilities. And I don't think we get to any of the extra upper level thinking that our beautiful panelists have talked about until we reach that level of awareness and understanding of what even is possible with this. And so I think for those asking questions, I think that's a good place to start, and being curious in that light, and just simply, what can this do? And dabble with some of these resources that we've suggested today. See the possibilities that are from it, and from those, maybe we have these sparks completely unrelated to the thing we were probing it for. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about AI, is that you ask it for one thing, and I don't know how many times I was like really trying to figure out something with ChatGPT, and then it said one thing, and I was like, that's a fantastic idea, and it was completely unrelated to the thing I was actually wanting to try and get at. And so I guess if I was grading it on achieving that goal, it would have gotten a 0. But very great for creativity in terms of the inspiration. It led me in different directions. So yeah, so if we have some questions on the Zoom, you can use the raise hand function in person. We have a mic over there if we want to line up and ask those questions now.
So I guess, obviously I love AI, I use it quite a bit. The thing I get the most scared about with AI is how confidently it will give me the wrong answer. Mm-hmm. And so like sometimes I know enough to know it's giving me bad information, but then who knows how many times I don't know it's giving me bad information. Yeah. So I guess like as educators, when you're teaching the use of AI with students, how would you go about giving them that awareness to know how to analyze the responses they're getting to know if it's accurate or not?
Thank you.
I remember when I was first playing around with ChatGPT, and I asked it for some scholarly resources on some topic I was looking for, and it came back like with a list of 10, and I'm like, that is awesome. I hadn't heard about that. Oh, this one is great too. And then I looked them up, and they didn't exist. and so I guess like anything, we want to teach our students about information literacy. It's just kind of, it's like what you read in the news or what you read on the internet, it may or may not be true, or it may have degrees of truthiness to it. And so you want to make them aware that AIs do hallucinate, and that they should double check any facts or sources that it gives them.
I think that ChatGPT and other large language models, this is really interesting to me. I'm fascinated by the things they don't know. For instance, if you ask them about TV shows, if it's not something that has been written about in a blog, they are completely, ignorant of it, which makes some sense because they don't have eyeballs, so like, so they've never watched, the countless hours of TV that we have. It's just kind of an interesting little tidbit there, but also they often, I haven't done this with ChatGPT recently, but at some point I discovered that it was really ignorant of what it was, which was interesting to me, like, and of its own capabilities. If I asked it a question, so like musical improvisation, like has to happen like in time, right? And I asked it, okay, if I give you here's my prompt. I want you to give me an action that I'm going to like perform as an improvising musician. Wait 30 seconds and then give me another prompt. And it said, sure, I'll do that. And it gave me the first prompt. It said, play a whatever figure, and then it never came back. And I said, did you forget about me? After like a minute, I said, did you get lost? What happened? And it was like, oh, here's the second thing. And I was like, and I said, well, can you do the thing? Can you wait? And it was like, no, I can't. Like, can you wait and then just give me another prompt? And, so like, it had no idea that it couldn't do that, and like, we got into this conversation where it was like, okay, yeah, I can't do that. I have no clock, and I mean, it was a really fascinating conversation, but I mean, like, because of that, I mean, as musicians, unless there's some understanding of time, the thing cannot possibly be a musician. I mean, that's a huge problem. So I mean, I think that you have to have some sort of understanding, and you have to interrogate these things, with like smart questions, to kind of like instigate, problems and see where it's holes are. I've had that same experience, by the way, about it gave me a bunch of sources and they weren't real. Yeah, that's not fun.
Hi, good morning. I'm Marina McLaren, coming to you from Maryland. Thank you so much for putting this event online. So my question, because I have taught at the K-12 level, but currently I'm working with pre-service music educators, so undergraduate students, and I feel like we're always quick to say, teachers need to be trained to do this, but then we all know it's very hard to add anything else to the already jam-packed degree plans. So what's your advice for introducing undergraduate music ed majors to AI technology? How would you integrate it into the existing curriculum?
Thanks for that question. This is a good deal of what I'm doing right now as a music education professor, especially with, I just had a freshman class that came in and we had to talk about AI because they're using it. Just a very quick version of that is, I think like anything else, we have to play with it. Right now we make it so serious. We make it into another task, another thing that we have to learn about. It's kind of like how I think about improvisation. When you put so many parameters on improvisation that people don't want to enter that space because they feel like they're going to fail, you make it impossible for them to do that. So a lot of what we do, in at least for undergraduates, at least in my classes, is to start experimenting with it, play with it in class, ask it a question, interrogate it, model these things as a sort of play. The same as you would with anything as you're growing up and you're playing with blocks or tools, and I think through that you start to discover what's going on here in a much more situated way. And as that play happens, then you can start refining those processes in a way that are meaningful to the students. So that includes writing tasks, that includes creative prompting, that includes discussion posts. Play with it and ask it to, ask them to think about what that product was and how they can make it better. And I find that because the iterative nature of AI is so powerful, the back and forth is so powerful, that this is actually a really wonderful way of introducing the tool to undergraduates.
Can I ask you to elaborate just a little bit on that last answer? Because you said play with it.
Yeah.
And it's not obvious to me what it is. There's, a proliferation of these tools at a pace that's probably difficult to keep up with, even if that's your profession. I've dabbled in these and I find myself quite frustrated after a while to say, well, it's taken me 2 days to figure out what Udio really does, and I haven't really produced anything yet. I'm just sitting around making dud, little demonstrations. And I don't even know if that's where I should be playing. Maybe I should be looking at something else. So is there any kind of hierarchy or sequencing and sort of named places to start, or how do you keep track of that?
I'll very quickly, just to follow up on that. Again, these guys are doing much more of the musical stuff, and I'm doing much more of the kind of thing that you would do just at home or in a writing task. I think just start with asking questions, just asking the thing questions, and just starting to play with assignments. So I'm writing a paper on this. Can you give me some ideas about how this might go? Oh, that's an interesting idea. I wonder if you thought about it this way. And really, it's conversational. I think of it as a lot of music educators learn at bars at conferences. That's what we do. We go to sessions and we're asleep. And so then what happens is we go to the bar at night and we hang out with really cool, smart people. And by the end of the night, after a few drinks and a lot of conversation, you go, God, I really got a lot of information about that. I feel like definitely don't drink too much while you're working with AI. But I think if you don't start there, you get too caught up in the processes which are still being developed. And you miss out a lot on the creative play. So I'm really talking about playing, just playing with whatever questions you might have. That leads you to decide then what it is that I might use it for, at least from the LLM model, from the large language model. ChatGPT is fine. I mean, just start there. It's easy to use, I think.
And we keep saying there are other large language models out there and these are not all the same. So as we experiment with word-based things, we ought to be thinking about, well, what are other large language model things that are out there, like Bing, for instance? Some of them are actually included, linked right to the internet, some aren't. So some are in their own little world, which may or may not have the information you want, but others may be more suitable and actually more valid if they are, in fact, using their world and maybe links to the internet itself. So that's another way to think about that. And I'm like you. When I started with Udio, I didn't understand. I quickly understood what it was trying to do, and so I watched a very large number of lengthy and more up-to-date YouTube clips on that, and I found instantly that I got an idea of what it did and what I didn't like about it and what I did like about it, and so that's a tip maybe to use the YouTube world.
I've seen some of those. I guess I was thinking more of the music production side,
Yeah.
But not for scholarship. I mean, just for goofing off and having fun.
Yeah,
But it's
goofing- yeah.
still, a vast terrain. So if you've got any insights into where to start, that would be great.
On the music production side, I'll say that I've learned a lot of these. I learned about a lot of these things through my course, that final project where the students all go and find things that I don't know anything about. That has been fantastic. So I've learned about a lot of these things. And the great thing about it is I encourage them to, sort of like follow their own interests, so someone really wants to be an AI, audio engineer, so they get into Isotope, and somebody else was really interested in film composing, so they learned this new app called Dynascore, which it has a little dinosaur as the model, and which I thought was cute, and it was a fascinating program. But there's a million of them, I mean, there's just lots and lots of these little apps that people are working on. And, I would come back to it, the next time I would teach the class, and, about 80% of them were not there anymore, because, the app, it had some potential, and then it was either bought out by somebody or it just kind of went away for one reason or another. And it's pretty, we're at the cutting edge of this, where like a lot of that, gold rush feeling is happening, and lots of people are starting things and then failing completely. So don't be surprised if you get really attached to something and then it goes away. It's pretty rare that something like Moises comes along that's probably going to be here in 5 to 10 years, and same thing on the large language model, there are all kinds of new chatbots and things popping up. Certainly Bing is going to be here for a while. Certainly Claude is going to be for ChatGPT, but but the little things that do little interesting things here and there are probably, have a high tendency to just die after a year.
I know that we're fast moving to the point at which we need to break for the next panel discussion, but I do have a question for you, and I'm going to shift gears altogether, because you represent in many ways the profession of higher education, and AI is a disruptive technology, disruptive in the sense of what it can do for you, and all these case studies that you've been talking about in terms of your own experience with it, but also your role in the greater world of music. and what value the profession of music education might have in a world in which everybody has access to all the goodies that you thought you had control over for so many decades. So no longer do you have the control over access to information, the digestion of that information, the formation of those ideas, and the sort of mentality that surrounds this information arena. What do you do going forward to make sure that your values and your beliefs are still maintained in music education?
Well, thanks for a nice, simple question to end our time together. But I think it goes back to what it means to be musical, what it means to be a musician. It's that communal feeling when we're playing in an ensemble or singing or playing with another person. And it's coming from you. It's not coming from an external source that you've provided some input. It's a very personal sort of thing. I don't think that's going to go away, and at least not anytime soon. I can't see how AI is going to substitute for that.
Similarly, I think that the thing AI is really good at is copying what has come before, and the thing musicians and other creative people are good at is doing things that have never happened before. So the way forward to be, to like survive AI is to just be more creative, so we can't be at all lazy. Like we have to be, on it. We have to be more creative. We have to be coming up with newer and better ideas, because a lot of the lazy ideas are going to be eaten up by AI and people who are lazy doing AI.
So I think this has been going on forever. I mean, every time there's a new technological revolution, we freak out and we think we're going to disappear. And, technological revolutions, including artificial intelligence, are human things. This is just a reflection of a particular type of way that we think and process, right? The idea that, when we think about consciousness as sort of through like a machine model, well, consciousness is what created that machine model. Right, so human beings are always at the center of things, and I think of this as in a very different way. I can go to McDonald's and get something that looks like a simulacrum of a meal, and it's cheap, and I'll do it. It's fine. I can go to Hardee's and do the same thing, but I will pay a premium amount of money to interact with a person who makes a particular type of meal that has a particular approach to doing something that's artistic, that comes from a human being in a particular setting, and I'm willing to actually work hard for that. I feel that as teachers, what is going to shift is that our role is going to shift into curators and individuals who offer experiences, prompts, interactions, relationships that cannot be done by artificial intelligence, the very human side. And those are going to change, obviously, but I think there's always going to be a need for that. I just don't feel like, at least in my lifetime, that we're ever going to lose that need for what human beings do that is so special, but that this will definitely enhance it. So I'm not scared, but not yet.
I wanted to add a really final quick note. There are a series of 5 videos from a person named Malik, who teaches at the Wheaton Management School, that Bill Bauer turned me on to lately. Those 5 videos are quite informative about much of what we've been talking about, and I encourage you to watch those. Those are all easily available on YouTube. I think those are excellent introductory videos.
Well, let's go ahead and thank our panelists one more time, please.